From the developmental years in early education to institutes of higher learning, teachers and educators help us to understand the world in molding, guiding us, and being mentors in aspects of our lives. Concluding this mini-series on Teacher Appreciation Week for 2025, I am joined by Micah Bellieu, CEO of Fluency Corp. We explore her story growing up in Oklahoma, navigating the education system before the year 2000. After graduating from the University of Boston, she guides us in a journey to move abroad to Mexico and begin teaching Spanish, fully immersing herself in the culture and life and overcoming the challenges that come with language and communication. Eventually returning to the US and seeing an opportunity to expand on her love of languages, she embarks on the first steps in creating Fluency Corp, bringing accessible and effective language learning skills to business clients at an enterprise level and further expanding to child education and personal use. So welcome back to the ESL sessions on the mini-series on Teacher Appreciation Week for 2025. On this episode, I actually have the fortune to be able to talk to somebody in a very different field of education, but still nonetheless a very important part of education. It's not in the conventional sense where we speak to teachers in the education system that also have mentors and pupils outside of higher learning. Before we get into the role of what she does in her day-to-day life, as well as what a facet of education she works with, I'll let her give herself a little bit of an introduction, and then we can go ahead and continue the interview from there. So whenever you're ready.
Great. So my name is Micah Bellieu. I'm the founder of Fluency Corp and True Fluency Kids. I've been a teacher in the conventional and non-conventional senses for over 15 years. I currently live in Dallas, but I've lived in Spain, Mexico, Boston, and travel every year to France.
Yeah, that's a really unconventional way to put it. So as the CEO of Fluency Corp, and what was the second organization?
True Fluency Kids.
True Fluency Kids. So we'll touch a little bit on that on a little bit of later on in the interview. I know we just talked about it just shortly before we started recording, but how about you tell us a little bit about yourself? Growing up, you grew up in Dallas, Texas, or were you grew up anywhere else?
Just north. So born and raised in Oklahoma City. My grandparents moved there in the 50s from Mexico. They came from Juarez, and they had their kids there, loved it, decided to stay, and I spent 18 years there.
Wow. So second or third generation Mexican American in north of Texas, in Oklahoma City, correct?
Yes, in Oklahoma.
In Oklahoma. Gotcha. Yeah. So staking on a little bit on the subject itself, how was it for you growing up in Oklahoma in the educational system? If I can ask around what time you started school.
Yeah, I started school at the traditional age of 5 in kindergarten, and I would say I got really lucky. I think luck has so much to do with life. We didn't live in a great neighborhood, but the teachers that I had in my elementary school were just top notch. And they just really put everything into us. At that time, they had classes for those who accelerated learning, I guess you could call it, really, really eager. And so we really just kind of got to speed through things and get extra homework. Like, we were quite nerdy. So it was a great experience for my elementary and junior high and high school. So
Gotcha. And so when did you graduate from high school?
2000.
In 2000. Okay, so just at that end turn before the new changes to at least by the Bush administration for the No Child Left Behind initiative. So yeah. From your experience growing up in the early 2000s, late 90s, and then graduating in 2000, how was that for you growing? Yeah, how was that experience going through that system of education during that time, especially in what doing some research and looking at some trends on education? Oklahoma, just the state itself isn't very well known for being one of the higher producers of, higher education learners.
Exactly. That's why I say lucky. Yeah. With this elementary school, they had programs for us if we were interested in certain things after school. So if you wanted more learning, you could get it. It was just really, really exceptional. And I joke because I remember seeing a guy passing my window who had stolen a TV. So it wasn't the greatest neighborhood. But the school got lots of accolades and won awards for what was going on in our neighborhood. And my mom didn't choose that neighborhood for the school. You know, she was a single mom. She chose that neighborhood because she could afford that house. And so elementary school was really great. And I don't know how I feel about, separating the kids into different classes today. Personally, I haven't done the research and really thought about it. Um, so I don't know if that would be a good idea today, to be completely honest. When I kind of did the accelerated class for those who wanted to go faster, because I think the research shows that all kids do better if we're all together. So I will say that. But I think I did grow up at the very beginning of AP tests in high school, and if you wanted to take honors and pre-AP and AP, and I think it was less common then for those kinds of programs. And in our high school, it was a good neighborhood for the high school. It was a good school. It wasn't the greatest school, but it was a good school. And of course, all public schools. Um, and they had um, two teachers had created a special English literature and history program where you would stay with them for many years and kind of learn history along with the literature that was written at that time. A very, very unique program. So I had those teachers and became obsessed with languages and took Spanish and French at the same time, which I do not suggest.
No, that sounds really, really interesting, especially because I want to say me, I was actually am technically a product of the No Child Left Behind initiative. And
Mhm.
even from interviewing previous teachers that I've had that were educators in the early 2000s, especially in Northern Nevada, is
Mhm.
is that change in curriculum as well as the requirements for students for everybody who was participating in the standardized testing, and as well as
Mhm.
like I mentioned the new changes in curriculum. It sounds really really interesting that they were offering those AP classes, and then the teachers themselves seem so much more involved with the students, being that they recognized that the system and in the current state's education levels just weren't working for them to be able to help out. But let me ask you with that. So with your experience in taking, were you a part of these special classes, the accelerated classes themselves?
Yes, I'm a little fuzzy on the exacts, but I know that when I was around 5, I think I had to take some kind of a test, and there aren't typically accelerated classes in elementary schools, and I don't know why we had one. It's really curious. And so from, you know, second grade, um, all of the kids who were just rapidly going through material were in a class together. And I would say I stayed like that from second grade on because they did the honors and the harder classes in junior high too. And then it continued into high school. So from second grade on, we were in the more challenging classes, which is not, I don't hear about that in elementary schools now.
Yeah, no, it's not very typical actually. If anything, the closest that I have heard from maybe within the past 10 years or so was the gifted and talent program in
Yeah, me
certain school
too.
systems, correct?
Yeah,
So
and we had that too. So we were in the hard classes and then we were pulled out for more stuff. Very unique. Yeah.
yeah, that sounds, yeah, that's really rigorous. That's one thing that like I said, is definitely like to hear about that, especially doing the interviews, is just the entire different types of facets and sections. I want to say it like that to each education system, especially in the regions and in the rural areas as well. But sticking still a little bit with your early education and pre-university. So at any point in well, not even want to say at any point, there must have been somebody in your high school or your middle school or your elementary school out of the teachers and educators that inspired you or you looked up as a mentor. Do you have anybody in particular that helped you out or may have been there for you during those times in your educational career?
I think there were so many, but if I had to talk about a few, um, haven't thought about this woman for decades. Miss Brock in fourth grade, like I said, we had this accelerated group. She had the accelerated kids, and she just pushed us, but not in a stressful way. I just remember that just kept giving us more if we wanted more and just encouraging us. She was very firm. She was not mushy gushy. And we were young, we were 9 and 10. So I just liked the work ethic, stuff had to be turned in on time, etc. Um, and then I would fast forward to sophomore, freshman year in high school. That the Spanish teacher that I had then, that got everything started. Um, I know her name started with an S, but I'm blanking. She just loved what she did. It was so clear. She loved speaking to us in Spanish. She loved talking about the culture in Mexico and other countries. And so, because I was so excited about that class in general, um, I didn't have that great of experience with my French teacher. So she allowed my passion to grow. Um, and so that was really exciting. She just made it really fun. It was always fun. Everyone wanted to go to Spanish class, even the people that had no interest in Spanish. So that was exciting. And then that history and English program, those two teachers that worked together, um, I've just never heard anyone having that kind of creativity of putting the history alongside the literature. Um, yeah, they just had us so thrilled to be learning in that way. So unique.
Yeah, it's really unique about teachers in general that once we kind of grow up, I want to say, because I've had that similar experience with myself, is that we don't really tend to recognize how much extra effort and in how different it is for them to be teaching younger little human beings that are barely coming into this world and have them
Yeah.
be as excited as they are to be able to go to their classes, to be able to talk to them and to be able to just participate. I think that's the biggest thing, participation. If I can say for myself, I've had the same opportunities to be able to interview for this mini series two of my own personal favorite teachers, and then listening to them is, and then you talking about how you had your experiences with your teachers right now. It's like it's one of those things where there's such a connection, and they're so influential in our lives that we don't realize it until it's later, and then sometimes we get the opportunity to be able to talk to them and ask them and let them know, hey, look, you did all of these great things for me, and I appreciate your time as an educator. And sometimes it doesn't, but like I said, that's the main reason why I asked. I wanted to see if by any chance, who knows, they might hear about it, somebody might tell them about it, and they'll hear this shout out for them for being such great educators.
Yeah. So for the Spanish teacher, I'll say shout out from Victoria and Micaela.
There you go. That's always
You'll
fun.
remember our Spanish names.
That's awesome. Well, moving it a little bit more forward. So you graduated in 2000.
Yes.
What was your next step in education? Did you go directly to university, vocational school, or how was that for you?
So I was obsessed with the East Coast, and I had never really been. I didn't get to travel a lot as a kid. And so I can't tell you why. I just felt like that was going to be a better fit for me. And so I think that's why I pushed so hard in school. I was really, really hard on myself to make sure that I could get in to one of the colleges there. And so I applied to Boston University. My mom and dad did not go to college at that time, and I was a little lost on how to do all of that. And my parents were trying to help the best they could, but they hadn't done it either. And so I did apply to Boston University, and I got in. So I headed to Boston.
Gotcha. And what was your major in Boston during the time that you were there?
Well, I was so excited about education that I just kept taking classes that I loved. And then right before senior year, um, the counselor advisor brought me in and said, "You have not declared a major. Would you like to graduate? This is the last year to do it." Um, and so I chose English literature, and I had to take all literature classes that year to graduate.
Wow. So it was really kind of a quick turning point on you really put in that extra work during your time at university at college, but I guess it just kind of does come to a head at the very end on whether you're graduating or not. So you are a English literature major. You
Right.
completed your time at the Boston University, so at the University of Boston. What was the next step from there?
So English literature is a lot of reading and a lot of writing. I'd always wanted to be a writer. And so I applied for a small administrative job at the local newspaper. It's a free newspaper. It's called an alternative newspaper. It's like the Village Voice in New York, but it was called the Boston Phoenix. And I knew I wasn't going to be 22 and get a writing job, really, right out of college. But I knew I could hang around the editors. At least they'd know my name and I could get something. So I kept doing the administrative job for 2 years, and I did get to start writing for the newspaper.
Wow. And how was that experience for you, especially now having experienced the culture of the East Coast? Because like I said, growing up in the southern United States, southwestern United States, to be more specific, is very different from being on the East Coast, and nonetheless in a rough and tumble known city like Boston, very similar to New York City, Philadelphia, Newark, and all those places.
It fit me. I felt like I was home. I just always was drawn to what I had heard about it, what I had seen about it. Of course, TVs and movies aren't a great representation, but my grandma was a huge traveler. My dad and my mom were not, but my grandma was, and so I just heard so many great things about so many other cities. And so for me, it felt like I was home. I was where I was supposed to be.
Got it. And then at what point did you leave the newspaper and begin to pursue your career as a teacher, as an educator?
So when we choose our degrees and think we know what we want to do, things can often change because we have never actually done them before, right? It's like we study them, but we haven't done them. And so I liked writing, but I did realize in those 2 years that it was not likely going to be the thing that paid my bills. It wasn't going to be this full-time thing. And so I really had to figure out, well, what the heck now? I thought I was going to be a writer. And so I quit the job at the paper, and I actually waited tables for about a year and a half to 2 years. And I think near the end of that 2 years, I said, all right, what are we doing? What is the next step here? When I was in college, when you're taking Spanish and French and Japanese, because I loved languages, of course, they always tell you about you can teach English abroad. And so that never left the back of my head. And I really had a goal to go teach English in Japan. And so I started looking online of how do you do this? How do we go teach English somewhere? And there are courses to be certified. And I saw that there was a course in Guadalajara. That just sounded fantastic, right? I don't know anything about Guadalajara. It just sounds like such an adventure. And so quickly shocked my family and said, I'm leaving for Guadalajara in 2 weeks. Paid the bill for the course and flew into Guadalajara. And while I was there, the program says it's a guaranteed that will get you a job. Um, but a curious thing happened. They did have jobs in Japan, but because I was living with lots of people who spoke Spanish, um, my Spanish was getting better. And my Spanish was always better than my Japanese because I'd studied it for much longer. But I couldn't really talk. I mean, it was just, words. I was doing lots of sign language. Um, and so I decided no more masters. What is it? No more jack of all trades, master of none. Stay here and you can't leave till you're fluent. Um, and so I actually chose a small town in the Yucatan Peninsula um, because I knew there weren't going to be any English speakers. I had previously studied abroad in Madrid, and to my great disappointment, we're in a school where everyone's learning Spanish, which means everyone speaks English. And so you only made friends with a lot of English speakers. And so this time I wasn't gonna lose this opportunity to get fluent. So I chose a tiny town with, well, it's not tiny, 200,000 people. It's not a tourist destination. It's not Americans and Canadians and lots of English speakers going through. And so I stayed there till I was fluent, which was about a year and a half.
Yeah, that sounds like a really well, one, a little bit of a jarring experience, especially for your family choosing to just kind of go and get up and literally decide to live abroad. I mean, yes, having roots in Mexico and being having family from there, but completely different, especially once you've lived in the United States for many years.
Yeah.
With
And I didn't know that family. Yeah.
Yeah, and then especially like you said, your family is originally from Juarez, from Chihuahua, completely
Yeah.
different region from Jalisco, Guadalajara, which is farther mid south and a completely different climate.
And then Campeche.
And then Campeche
Yeah.
as well. Yeah,
And it
from
gets worse. It gets worse. I was supposed to come back right after the program, and I never got on the plane home.
wow.
So
And
I packed for the course and I just never came home. I
y-
told him I was going to come back before I made this decision.
okay, and but then how did that decision in itself change your
My whole
entire
life.
course? Yeah.
Yeah. Everything about my life. I just, what it did is it put me in the shoes of all of my students because you're sitting there teaching a language to people while you're learning a language. So it was an incredibly interesting experience. And it's to this day, the hardest year and a half of my life. It's so lonely. It's, you feel so inadequate. Well, I don't want to say you. I felt so inadequate. I felt so lonely. It was incredibly hard, but you knew if you didn't keep going out there and trying to speak, you'd continue being lonely. So it was just so hard.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that a lot of people don't really recognize or understand, that especially once you're in the States. So kind of doing a little bit of an inverse on that, it's one of those generalized feelings that a lot of the ESL students that I have, that I was in school with, as well as with myself when I first came to the United States, is where you're so immersed into the situation that there is no other way other than you have to assimilate immediately. And yes, it's a little bit easier for a child, especially with developing all those new skills and verbal cues and everything. But as an adult, a little bit more difficult. But that seems to be the only way to be able to kind of grasp everything in the language, both aspects, context, and the necessity for what you can and you can't use. So
Yeah.
if I can ask with that, how confident after that experience of a year and a half, literally by yourself, how confident were you that you were speaking fluent Spanish?
So I would say I could understand everything everyone was saying. Maybe there would be a slang from time to time, and I would ask, what does that mean? Um, but yeah, so that was the confidence. But it's not a native fluency, right? It's a I can understand everything everyone is saying one on one. But if you go up a level in difficulty, so at a dinner with 10 people, everyone talking, da 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 da, it's harder, right? If there's any noise in the background, I'm actually currently at a conference in Croatia, and it's people from all over the world. And I sat at the table with people from Argentina, Mexico, and we're all speaking Spanish. And there's a huge band behind me. And I have a C1 level in Spanish now. And the girl across from me said, "Are you understanding me?" And I said, "It's a little hard because it's noisy." And she started to speak slower. And my friend goes, "She doesn't need you to speak slower. She needs you to speak louder."
Yeah.
It's just that I can't hear you.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
so it's a good level. It's a good level.
No, that's good. That does sound like it's a very bit of a it's definitely a higher and more advanced than I guess what the common person who isn't fully immersed in that would be able to experience. So
Well, you
if
just can't get that many hours in, you
mhm,
know? Like if you're taking a 2-hour conversation class a week, which is what I did with French for years and years and years. I mean, if you're getting 6 hours a day, every day for a year and a half, it's just time. Yeah.
yep, exactly. And as well, if I can kind of relate that back to myself,
Yeah, please.
I actually learned German. Took 3 years of German while I was in high school, and I actually had my own personal experience where I had to use it. Very broken, very not expert level, maybe an intermediate at the most, at the highest level. But I can definitely understand that it's very different, especially taking it from a personal a classroom setting to a professional and a personal situation with that, especially once you're speaking with native speakers in even in a different part of the world. And one thing that actually sticks with me that my German teacher she said to me is, and she actually told all of us as our students, was that yes, you can learn German, but I would not ever consider myself fully immersed or fully fluent unless I can actually understand the comedy or the jokes in the culture.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense, especially after my experience, and then especially as well as with going down south to South America to be an interpreter for the military to Ecuador. It's one thing being able to properly convey what you're instructing, what you're facilitating, but completely different if you can do that, but you can't have a relaxed, nonchalant conversational Spanish, which even in how fluent I am in both Mexican Spanish,
Yeah.
standard Spanish, and then even just translating for them, there was a couple things that even got lost in translation just because that's the Spanish slang with it, and they told me it's like, well, it means completely something different, so maybe
Yeah.
maybe don't use that out here. So it's always interesting, especially within the Spanish speaking countries, all of them, how one simple intonation too, a simple intonation and a
Yeah.
simple word can change the entire context of what you're trying to say.
No, 100%. I mean, I learned Spanish from Mexico, then I studied in Spain, then I moved to Mexico. Everyone was laughing so much the first few months I was there because they were like, "Who is this American girl with the accent from Spain here?" And of course, within 6 months, my Spanish accent was gone because it's so malleable because it's not my language. So I just copy what I hear. But yeah, yeah, so different.
Yeah, no, that's completely different. So with that information as well now, so you're now essentially at the level where you find it's completely natural to speak Spanish and to be able to use it in a professional environment. what came after that, now that you've immersed yourself in the entire linguistic culture of Spanish in this region of the world?
I will say my Spanish is not good in a professional environment because I learned by making friends in Mexico. I was never speaking in a professional way with my friends. So I really had the everyday talking to your friends. I now have employees in Mexico, and they have really helped me up my game because our meetings are in Spanish. But I stumble all over the place trying to find the words for a work meeting. So it's always so interesting. You only learn what you're around. And I had never worked in Spanish. So I was just going to say that.
Gotcha. So at what point did you begin Fluency? Well, I wouldn't say, what were the
Yeah.
precursors to be able to start Fluency Corp?
Yeah. So I moved back from Mexico and my mom had taken a job in Dallas. And so I moved in with my mom in Dallas and tried to find a job doing what I knew, which was teaching languages. And now that I could speak Spanish, I actually started teaching English and Spanish, and I would take any clients. So it would be middle school kids, high school kids, college age kid, not the college age, because again, that gets into the very technical and literature and writing theses. Didn't have that ability. But I could do, of course, Spanish 1, 2, and 3 for high school. That was easy. Um, and then I would get adult clients for English. Um, and so, really long story short, you put your tutor profile up on, at the time it was called Wisant. And people would contact you, and you would drive to their home or their office. So I just built this schedule of tutoring until I was basically full time. I'd filled my whole schedule. And then 3 years into that, someone emailed through the website saying we're a company and we have 3 employees. And then they disappeared. They disappeared. And they said, "Oh, we can't use this service because we have to invoice you. We're a company, and through the website you could only use a credit card." And so I saw their logo in the corner. I didn't want to lose working for this company because it could be long term and stable. And so I, copy and pasted the logo, put it into Google, and just called the front desk. And I said, "This woman, Jessica, is asking about English classes." Um, and so what happened with this company is we started with a small group and it just kept growing to the point that I couldn't handle any more hours in my week. I was working 7 days a week, 60 plus hours a week for 3, 4, 5 years. And it's not very sustainable, right? You don't take vacations, you don't do anything but teach. But I loved it. I loved it. And so they asked me, "Is it just you, or do you have other teachers?" And I lied through my teeth and I said, "Oh, yes, of course I have other teachers." And then I went online and was like, "How do you hire somebody?" So that was the beginning of Fluency Corp.
Wow, yeah, that's a real bedrock start to this now that you've created this worldwide business. And it really does sound like one of those, you have to kind of fake it till you make it, but not in a traditional
100%.
sense.
Yes. No, 100%. Never thought of starting a business. You see people who have started businesses and they had a plan. There was no plan.
Oh yeah, no. Sometimes, and then that's kind of the interesting part about how it just kind of does tend to happen for a lot of people, is there's usually always a plan, there's an outline and everything, and then some people just kind of get thrust into the opportunity or get put into a
Yeah.
situation, and it sounds like you really took advantage of that, and it shows especially, it shows very clearly, especially with your passion for wanting to be able to be an educator, a teacher for these languages, to be able to help them out in what they also needed to succeed. So when around what year was this when you were approached by this company and the initial start of Fluency Corp occurred?
I would say I started tutoring in 2010, and I probably was with them in 2012 starting. And then I think 2 years into starting with them, I finally started the business.
Wow. So
Like officially said, this needs a name. So probably I think 2014 is my official incorporated. I got an LLC.
yeah, wow. No, yeah, that's that. And people don't see that. People don't see that. And I'm definitely guessing that that time kind of flew by, especially from how when you started immediately just being a teacher to tutoring and stuff, and then going into that small business mindset to fully incorporating yourself as an LLC. And with that information as well. So 2014, you are now fully committed. There's a logo, there's an LLC, there's complete backing. Now you have other educators. Now you have other opportunities to be able to continue teaching. When did you start incorporating the other languages? Because it's always one of those things where it's like it would be a completely different question if it was like, wow, you continue to just teach nothing but Spanish. But looking at the research and doing a little bit of research on your business in itself and testimonials and stuff, it just seems there's a widespread amount of locations as well as different languages. If you can touch a little bit on that.
So, fun fact is the original name of the company was Learn English or Spanish. And I can't remember when, but at some point, someone asked for another language, and I was like, oh man, but our name is Learn English or Spanish. I've put myself in a corner. And at some point, I had a brainstorming with my dad who loves marketing, and we decided on Fluency Corp. Um, and so I don't even know who asked for it first, but someone must have asked for another language. And, it's the same process. But the tricky part was, uh, I had to hire native speakers who, went to college in those places to make sure of the level, because I can't check their level, right? I don't speak all those languages. And so yeah, I started hiring native speakers for other languages, but really only about 10 languages get requested, globally. There's not this high demand for Turkish or other some other languages that you don't hear many people learning about. So I would say it's really just 10.
Very so yeah, that's a very specific thing too when you really look into the way that the way the entire business, if you go into those specifics, is that it's very globalized into some specific languages, some that I can name off the top of my head, and you can
Sure.
correct me if I'm wrong. Definitely Japanese, Chinese, Mandarin or Cantonese, French, Italian, Spanish for sure, English definitely. But what are some of the other more uncommon languages that are more involved in the business corporate side or just in the enterprise level, I guess I would say?
So I'll say one fun fact. Most people think that the languages out of China are requested, and they never are. And my theory on this is China has gone so full force on English for those going into business. And I just see, kids fluent by 12 because they just do their daily English classes online with VIP kids. Um, and, you know, Mandarin takes about 2,000 practice hours to get to a level of being able to do business. So it's never been requested. Isn't that crazy? Maybe once. So just throwing that fun fact out there. But yes, all of the English and Spanish, definitely. English because it is the universal business language. Even if it's a German company doing business in Japan, everyone is using English as the business language. And then Spanish, of course. There are just so many Spanish-speaking people in countries all around the world. We don't get French too often. Again, I think so many people are doing business in English, but we get French, we get Italian, we get Portuguese, but these are 1%. Spanish and English are really where it's at.
Got it. Yeah, that's a real interesting fact, especially how
German.
you say. Yeah. No, yeah. So and like I said, just doing a little bit of research that's just one of those things that kind of surprised me. And those were the main questions that kind of popped up when I went onto the search engines, is that those were some of the main ones. I didn't know specifically that Mandarin was, or what do you call it? Yes, any of the Chinese languages or dialects were not very that far being requested or even really being used. So that's a real big interesting fact, especially for such a, like I said, such a quick turnaround with the way that businesses have been doing globalization and trade between different multiple countries, and a lot of the hubs of manufacturing and distribution are out of mainland China or even Hong Kong. Yeah. So what have been some of the good experiences and the bad experiences that you've had, or your educators that you know of have had with dealing with corporations in teaching at an enterprise level? Because there's always good to hear that people are learning, but some struggles and some challenges that come along the way with working with individual companies or full on systems.
Yeah, I'll tell you something recently that's just been really exciting and special. The last 6 months, we've gotten so many requests for starting an English program for companies' blue collar workers. And that's just really exciting for me, because when you've been working in a country, probably 5, 10, 15 years, when you're working with everyone who speaks your language, you're never really put in a position to get better with English. And so that's been really exciting. We just did some assessments for one company last week, and the employees are just so excited to learn. So companies are building these pathways for people with leadership skills and talent, and they really want to grow them. And I love that. So that's something that is really exciting. It's fine teaching, the CEO improved English, but this is much better. This is really life-changing. And so that's an exciting thing, I think, happening right now. And with the same population working for these companies, what can be challenging is trying to really explain to these companies how long language takes to develop, how long fluency takes, how many hours. You'll have companies saying, oh, can we do a 26-hour course? Well, we can. But what are your expectations to get out of that? It's 600 speaking hours for them to confidently work in the language. What are we thinking with 26? So that's a really hard educational curve when trying not to burst their bubble and get these programs started. But also having to be honest and realistic of how long language takes. If it was quick, we'd all be fluent in 5, right? If it didn't take that much time, but it just takes so much time. And so my challenge is just getting in the door, getting these programs started, and letting them see the changes in a certain amount of hours, and then giving reporting on how much progress they've made, so that it does get renewed, so that everyone can continue learning who wants to.
No, yeah, that's very true. And it does sound like going through the entire aspect of how it is, one already with your vast experience in everything that you've done so far, both in the way that you've learned language, but as well as having that experience with other businesses and locations to be able to get that fluency up. It is a little bit difficult trying to explain to that corporation or that group saying that they want 26 hours, but it's really more of a 260 hours just to get to maybe an intermediate level or even less.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can definitely understand that, but that really does sound like those are the small challenges, that really just kind of maintain that thriving power to be able to keep reaching out and then to be able to get them to understand, but as well as a better way of remarketing of, hey, this is a comprehensive, all-inclusive situation that is not immediate, especially in the current world that we live in with everything being available so quickly. So it's very true.
Yes, and they're like, oh, should we just give them an app? Who's gotten fluent on an app? Who's gotten fluent? Show me one person.
I mean, Duolingo does a lot of things, but it's definitely not a one for one. And yeah, I can definitely relate with that one and say that even my experience touching back on German with Duolingo has been completely different to actually being in Germany and even attempting to speak it. Well, with that information as well, what other ventures does Fluency Corp, your vision for the corporation, for your business in general, and for educators, how does that look within the next 5 to 10 years?
I don't know when it happened with Fluency Corp, but I had this vision for three products, one for kids, one for individuals, and then one for corporations. And so I believe in around 2014, I started, no, it had to be earlier. I believe probably in 2012, a mom at a local school in Dallas, Texas, said, please, please, please do an after-school Spanish program at my school. And of course, I'd taught kids before, so I wasn't nervous about that part. But I hadn't written a curriculum for children. And I searched and searched and searched, and there wasn't one. So long story short, the after-school Spanish program in Dallas, Texas grew to about 7 schools. I believe we had 150 students participating, and then COVID hit. And I was run ragged, I will tell you, because all the classes happened at the same time. And so I was running from school to school and hiring other people to run to other schools because teachers had to be in the classrooms, but someone also needed to kind of be managing to make sure all the kids got into each class, because the teachers can't be in the class and looking for the other kid if they didn't make it to the school, to the classroom. That's why we have principals and administrators and tons of people in an office. And so I had already been thinking, oh, I wish this was online, because we only get the kids once a day. I'm not actually making an impact with once a week. So if I'm not seeing progress, I get really frustrated. I wasn't liking my product. And so when COVID hit, I just took it as a sign, shut down the whole thing, and figured out, how do I do an online curriculum? How do I get kids in class 2 to 3 times a week? Really, really, really small classes, so everyone gets tons of talk time, because that's how we get fluent. You don't become a master tennis player by watching it on TV or reading a book about it. You got to play tennis. And so that company now is about 4 years old. We named it True Fluency Kids Spanish Immersion Program. And it's growing great. And we've created a curriculum specifically for online, crazy interactive, live teachers always. Everyone's out of Mexico. And we've created now 9 levels. And so we've had some kids in our classes for 3 years now. So that's just super exciting. You can just be so creative. So I really, really love the product that I have now.
Yeah, especially reaching out to getting to that root level of the language learners, especially taking on, especially very very much, especially taking opportunity of the entire COVID shutdown. As unfortunately as bad as it was, it did bring out a lot of good things for people to be able to pursue and to kind of diminish that necessity for having to do a lot of the in person when it's not completely possible. But it really does sound like there's a completely large horizon for Fluency Corp and just the business in general to expand.
Yes, and I'm not, everything online. Like I'm not like huge, like things need to be online. But I kept looking at the logistics of these in-person kids classes. The parents couldn't bring them more than one day a week. We were never going to get them the progress they wanted. And so because of this technology and everyone got used to it, I I really saw it as the only way to get kids speaking to someone in Spanish for 30 minutes to an hour, 2 to 3 times a week, when I just knew parents couldn't be driving to another place 3 times a week.
Yeah, so it really does sound like it's a very attainable, a very attainable type of.
Realistic. Yeah.
Yes, there you go. Very realistic and attainable in its own way to be able to be able to continue and for people to be able to use it, especially. Well,
Yeah.
Micah, I think we've touched a good portion about everything that in general that I wanted to really interview you about, especially like I said, this is a very unique episode and a very unique experience, especially talking with somebody who has one been through such a very unique experience in their journey to be able to be fluent and immersed. But is there
Yeah.
anything else that you would like to add? Any questions for me or any other information?
No questions on my side, just encouraging people, especially when it comes to languages, just consistency and really getting that time to talk with someone. There's so many pretty really low cost things out there to get to practice and talk with someone online. So I just really encourage anyone if they feel like they don't have anyone to practice with. There's so many companies out there with awesome people willing to chat with you.
Yeah, and that sounds perfect. And then where can my listeners or just anybody in general that stumbles upon this episode, where can they find you to be able to reach you or just to get a little bit more information about you in general and your corporation at Fluency Corp?
Yeah, so fluencycorp.com talks all about who we work with and who would benefit the most. And then for truefluencykids.com, that is specifically just for Spanish, and it's for kids 4 and up.
Thank you again, Micah, for accepting the invitation for the ESL sessions in mi
Thank you
comunidad.
so much.
Yeah, no, not a problem, and especially for being one of the few, one of not one of the few, one of the teachers and educators to be able to be a part of this Teacher Appreciation Week for 2025. And then from myself, I would really like to extend another invitation if you would like to come back on another episode for maybe another topic in language or just in general. But thank you for being a teacher, an educator, and doing what you do to be able to help get people and your students to that level of fluency and to be able to give them that confidence to be able to be self-sufficient in language in whatever venture or endeavor that they're going after.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the time and the invitation.
Not a problem. Well, we'll go ahead and close it off for now. This has been the ESL sessions en mi comunidad with Ms. Micah Bellieu, and we'll go ahead and close it off. Have a good evening.
Thank you.